Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on the world of fashion. We're going to follow the incredible journey of a trend, all the way from a single spark of an idea to the clothes that are literally hanging in your closet right now. You've been there, right? You see a really bold look on the runway, or maybe in a magazine, something wild like an androgynous suit, and you just have to ask yourself, where did that actually begin? How does something so out there become the next big thing? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack.
Okay, first things first, we need to make a really key distinction here. We use the words all the time, but fashion is not the same thing as dress. Dress is, functional. It's what we wear to stay warm or for protection. But fashion? Oh, fashion is a language. It's this incredibly powerful cultural system that communicates who we are and maybe even who we want to be. So, if fashion is a language, where do the new words even come from? I mean, where are trends actually born? For a long time, the answer seemed really simple. But it turns out it's more of a constant tug of war between the runway and the street.
For ages, the main theory was what we call the trickle-down effect. An elite designer dreams up a look, and then slowly it filters its way down to the rest of us. But there's this really powerful counterforce, the trickle-up effect. This is when a style starts on the street, think punk, think hip-hop, and it gets noticed by designers and bubbles up into high fashion. The real truth? Today, it's not really one or the other. It's a messy, chaotic, and constant conversation between the two.
Right, so whether an idea trickles down or bubbles up, it's still just that, an idea. To become the clothes we can actually go out and buy, it has to get plugged into the fashion industry machine. And this is a massive, global system that's designed to turn pure inspiration into actual inventory.
The easiest way to picture the industry is like a pyramid. Right at the very top, the peak, you've got haute couture. These are one-of-a-kind, custom-made works of art. From there, we move down into designer ready-to-wear, and then to bridge lines, which kind of connect that high fashion world to the high street chains we all know and shop at. And at the very bottom, the huge base of the pyramid, is the mass market, cranking out accessible styles for, well, pretty much everyone.
So what keeps this entire machine running at such a frantic pace? Well, it's powered by a concept called planned obsolescence. The industrial designer Brooke Stevens just nailed the definition. It's all about making us want something newer, better, and sooner than we actually need it. That constant desire for what's new is the fuel for the fashion engine. And this quote just brilliantly explains the cultural side of that cycle. The artist Otto von Busch said that fashion is basically a ritual for getting rid of extra stuff. Think about it. We ritually kill last season's trends with a big sale, which clears the racks and makes way for the new hope of the next collection. It's a pretty fascinating and maybe a little cynical way to think about the end-of-season sale. So, this whole idea that trends are literally designed to die off brings up a huge question. How long do they actually live? And that takes us to the life cycle of a look, where timing isn't just important. It's absolutely everything. To really understand a trend's life cycle, you have to get your head around this concept called Zeitgeist. It's a German word, and it basically means the spirit of the times. The idea is that for any fashion to really take off, it has to capture the current mood. It has to reflect the big events, the ideas, the technology of its era. It just has to feel right for right now. You know, the legend himself, Karl Lagerfeld, said it perfectly. Fashion is all about zeitgeist. He compared being a designer to being a well-working Swiss watch. You have to be exactly on time. If you're too early, nobody gets it, and if you're too late, well, you've already missed the boat.
And that critical timing plays out over 5 pretty predictable stages. It all starts with the introduction, when a new look is only worn by the bravest of the brave, the early adopters. Then comes the rise, as it starts to get wider acceptance. At its maturity, it hits peak popularity. But success can be deadly. It then enters the decline as it gets overexposed, until finally it reaches obsolescence. It's officially out of fashion.
But of course, not all of these cycles move at the same speed. I mean, take a fad. It just rockets through all 5 of those stages in a flash. It explodes into popularity seemingly overnight, and then it crashes and burns just as fast. It burns very, very bright, but it always burns fast. Now contrast that with a classic. A classic style, like a great trench coat or a perfect pair of jeans, it also goes through an introduction and a rise. But when it hits that maturity stage, it just stays there. It finds this long, sustained plateau of acceptance and never really hits that final stage of being obsolete.
Okay, so we have the idea, we have the industrial machine, and we have the life cycle. But how does a look that's born in one specific place get broadcast to the entire world? It needs a megaphone, and for decades, those megaphones have been fashion's global capitals.
For the longest time, the industry has been dominated by the Big Four. You've got Paris, the historic, elegant heart of haute couture. There's London, famous for its rebellious, creative edge and amazing tailoring. You have Milan, the capital of incredible craftsmanship and luxury. And of course, New York, the king of modern sportswear and commercial fashion. Each city has its own vibe, its own unique voice. But that story is getting so much bigger. Today, there are more than 30 countries that host their own fashion weeks. We're talking everywhere from São Paulo to Shanghai, each one promoting their own local designers and adding their voice to this huge global conversation. Fashion has really, truly gone worldwide.
So the next time you pull a piece of clothing out of your closet, just take a second to remember the epic journey it took to get to you. It started as a creative spark, an idea that somehow managed to capture the spirit of the times. It was then fed into a massive industrial machine, broadcast to the entire world from a global stage, and it lived and died according to this powerful, predictable cycle. And that brings this whole thing right back to you. We started this by saying fashion is a language. So now that you understand the grammar, now that you know the system behind the styles, when you get dressed tomorrow, what story are you going to choose to tell?
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to peel back the layers on one of fashion's most essential skills, drawing. We're going to see how designers take that little spark of an idea and turn it into a figure on a page that just pops with life, with attitude, with a real purpose. All right, let's get into it.
So let's kick things off with this really provocative thought from Tom Ford. Because, it just nails this fascinating line that fashion drawing has to walk. Is it pure art, or is it a commercial blueprint? Well, it's kind of both. And that push and pull, that's what makes it so interesting.
So before a designer even thinks about the clothes, every single sketch starts with a simple choice. And that is, what tool are you going to use? Because that decision, it sets the entire tone for the design.
You see, each one of these tools has its own personality, right? Graphite pencils, those are your workhorses for getting the basic ideas down. They react to every little change in pressure. But then you've got marker pens. Bam! Instant color, instant style. They're all about these vigorous, expressive drawings. For the really clean stuff, you need technical pens. Think precise, constant lines, the kind you need for those technical flats we'll talk about later. And charcoal? That's for pure feeling. Bold lines, rich tones. It's expressive, not precise.
Okay, now for what I think is the foundational secret that every designer has to learn. This is what turns a basic doodle into a professional fashion figure. It all starts with something called a croquis. Now, that's just a French word for sketch, but in fashion, it's so much more. Think of it as a foundational template. It's not supposed to be a realistic body, it's an idealized form that lets the designer focus completely on the clothes. And here it is, the magic number 9. The industry standard for a female fashion figure is to be 9 heads tall. Now you might be thinking, that sounds weirdly tall. And you're right. A real person is closer to 7 or 8 heads, so why the stretch? Well, this exaggeration creates this incredibly long, stylized, and elegant look. It makes the clothes hang in this very specific, very idealized way. So, with these super long proportions, how do you keep the figure from looking like it's just going to tip over? It all comes down to what's called the balance line. You start by dropping this imaginary vertical line, right from the neck to the floor. Then, and this is the key, you make sure the foot of the leg that's holding all the weight actually touches that line. That's what grounds the pose. After that, you can tilt the hips, create that gentle S-curve in the body, and arrange the arms and the other leg to create a pose that feels expressive and real.
Okay, so we've got the blueprint down. Now what? Well, now comes the fun part. This is where you breathe life, mood, and a real personality into that static figure.
One of the simplest tricks is just to break symmetry. Look, a symmetrical pose is fine. It's useful for checking your basic proportions, but it's also kind of rigid, a little boring, right? The second you shift that weight onto one leg, making the pose asymmetrical, bam! The whole figure becomes more dynamic. You can just feel the attitude and the movement coming off the page.
And that attitude is really different when you're drawing male versus female figures. For the female form, like we said, it's all about those exaggerated proportions, those long curved lines. But for the male figure, the emphasis is totally different. The proportions are a bit less extreme, and the focus is more on the structure, the muscle tone, especially in the chest and shoulders. The hips are narrower, the jawline is more squared. These aren't just little tweaks, they're choices that totally define the character of the silhouette.
And that personality, it really comes from the little details. Take the face. You emphasize the eyes and lips to show a mood, but you kind of de-emphasize the nose and ears so they don't distract. The hair should feel modern, but not overworked. And the hands. You draw them long and narrow, so they're expressive, but not the main event. But maybe the most important thing is the line itself. A single, confident line is just so much more powerful than a bunch of hesitant, scratchy ones.
Okay, this brings us to a really crucial distinction in the industry, because not all fashion drawings are the same. In fact, they have two very different jobs to do.
On one hand, you have the fashion illustration. This is about selling the dream. It's all art, all attitude. The goal here isn't to show you every little seam and button. It's to capture a feeling, a spirit. It's meant to make you feel something about the design. And then, on the complete other side of the spectrum, you have the fashion flat. This is pure, unadulterated information. It's a technical drawing, like a blueprint for the factory. No emotion, no cool pose, just a crystal clear diagram that communicates every single technical detail, from the cut and the seams to the sizing. One is art, the other is data, and you absolutely need both.
So, we've talked about the craft, the paper, the pencil. But where is all of this headed? Well, no surprise here, the drawing board is becoming a screen.
And let's be clear, computer-aided design, or CAD, it hasn't replaced the designer's skill. It's just given them a whole new set of super powerful tools. You've got vector software like Adobe Illustrator, which is perfect for those clean, scalable technical flats. Then there's stuff like Adobe Photoshop for creating really rich, textured, mixed media illustrations. And you even have specialized industry software with pre-made templates of collars and pockets that just speed up the whole process like you wouldn't believe.
And that really brings us full circle. From that simple pencil and the 9 heads rule all the way to a complex piece of software, the art of fashion drawing has always been about one thing: communication. It's about telling a story of a mood, of a character, of a silhouette. So yeah, the tools are always going to evolve. The real question is, what story will you choose to tell?
Welcome to The Explainer. Have you ever looked at a piece of clothing you love and wondered, how did this even come to be? Well, every single garment starts with two huge choices. What color is it, and what's it made of? Today, we're going to open up that designer's toolkit and see how these two things, color and fabric, are used to turn a simple idea into wearable art. This quote from the artist Fernand Léger just hits the nail on the head, right? It perfectly captures the power of our first tool. For a designer, color isn't just some decorative afterthought. It's essential. It's their main language for talking about emotion and communicating ideas. So first up, let's talk about the language of color. And, like any language, before you can get fluent, you've got to learn the basic grammar. For a designer, that grammar is the science of color itself. What we see as color is really just our eyes and brain interpreting how light bounces off of things. This is exactly why you can find a shirt that looks absolutely perfect under those bright store lights, but then you take it outside into the sunlight and it looks totally different. It really all boils down to one simple truth. Without light, there is no color. Period. Every color you can imagine is defined by 3 core properties. The very first one is hue. And hue is basically what we all just call color. Your red, your green, your blue. It's the pure, straight out of the rainbow version. It's a starting point. The second property is saturation. This is all about intensity. Think of it like a volume knob for a color's vividness. A super saturated red is that loud, bright fire engine red. But if you turn that knob down, the color gets quieter, more muted, until it becomes a dull brick color, or even just gray. And the third property, value, is what controls the lightness or darkness. So if you take that red hue and add white to it, you get a tint, which we just call pink. If you add black instead, you get a shade, like a deep maroon.
So with just those three things, hue, saturation, and value, a designer can spin an entire universe of tones from just one single base color.
Okay, but here's where it gets really tricky for any designer working today. For a physical garment that's going to end up in a printed magazine, they have to use the subtractive or CMYK model. That's where pigments absorb light. But for a digital lookbook on a screen, they have to completely switch their brain over to the additive or RGB model, where light is actually being projected out. It's the same design, but it requires two totally different ways of thinking about color. All right, so once a designer gets a handle on those building blocks, they can start forming actual sentences. And that's where we get to our next section, speaking in color palettes. This is all about how designers combine colors to tell the story of an entire collection. So have you ever wondered about that? Why some color combinations just feel right? Like an outfit looks so effortlessly cool, while another one just clashes and feels off. Well, it's not magic, and it's definitely not just good luck. It's an actual system based on color harmony and the color wheel. One of the most common ways to do this is with a complementary scheme. This is when you pair colors from opposite sides of the color wheel, like red and green, or blue and orange. The effect is designed to be bold, vibrant, and super high contrast. It's meant to grab your attention.
But for a totally different feel, designers will use what are called analogous schemes. These colors are all neighbors on the wheel, so they sit right next to each other. This creates a look that's much more serene, more harmonious, often really sophisticated. It's less about shouting and more about building a really cohesive mood.
Beyond just harmony, designers are always playing with color temperature. You've got your warm colors, your reds, oranges, yellows, that feel energetic, almost like they're jumping out at you. And then you've got your cool colors, blues, greens, violets, that feel calm and tend to recede. Designers use this constantly to set the mood for a whole season, from a fiery summer collection to a cool, quiet winter one.
Okay, so color is half the story, but now we have to talk about the designer's second essential tool, which is fabric. Here we're shifting from the visual to the physical. We're going to start with the building blocks, the raw fibers that give a fabric its fundamental character.
The huge, sprawling world of textiles can really be simplified into two big families. You've got your natural fibers, which are sourced from things like plants and animals, and then you have man-made fibers, which are created in a lab through chemical processes. A designer's choice between those two dictates pretty much everything about how a garment is going to perform. And that choice of fiber, it is everything. I mean, a designer picks cotton for a t-shirt because it needs to be soft and strong and absorbent for everyday wear. They choose wool for a sweater because they need warmth and something that'll hold its shape. And they'll turn to silk for a gown to get that incredible smoothness and shine. The raw fiber itself basically dictates the garment's whole purpose and feel.
But a fiber is really just the beginning. The next step is understanding how it's constructed into a fabric. That's the architecture of the fabric, and it dictates how it behaves. A great designer learns to sort of listen to what the material wants to do.
So the two main methods are weaving and knitting. Woven fabrics interlace different yarns to create a really structured, firm material, like denim or the fabric in a dress shirt. It holds a pretty rigid shape. Knitted fabrics, on the other hand, are made from interlocking loops of yarn, and that structure is what gives them that stretch and flexibility you get in a t-shirt. This one difference changes everything about how a garment fits and moves with your body.
So this brings us to the big, practical question. With literally thousands and thousands of options, how does a designer possibly choose the one, single, perfect fabric for their vision?
Well, it comes down to a really tactile, hands-on investigation. A designer doesn't just look at a swatch, they feel it. They drape the fabric to see how it hangs and falls. They think about its handle, which is just how it feels against the skin. They even have to think about its future. Is this thing going to shrink? Will it need to be dry cleaned? It's a full sensory evaluation to make sure the fabric won't just look right, but will actually perform the way the design needs it to. So from the science of light all the way down to the structure of a single thread, these are the tools of the trade. But they are just that. Tools. The real art of design, the real magic, isn't just knowing the rules of color and fabric. It's about knowing when and how to break them. As Churchill said, the empires of the future are the empires of the mind. The most incredible designs happen when a creator takes these elements and smashes them together in a way no one has ever seen before. Thanks for watching. Welcome to The Explainer. You know, have you ever really looked at a piece of clothing and just wondered, how did this go from a simple sketch to, well, this thing you're holding in your hands?
Today, we're pulling back that very curtain. We're going to follow a garment's entire journey, from that first spark of an idea all the way to a finished prototype, step by meticulous step.
So, how does a drawing become a dress? Well, it's not magic, though sometimes it kind of feels like it, right? It's actually this incredible journey that mixes pure, raw creativity with some serious, almost architectural precision. And that's the exact path we're going to follow. From inside the designer's mind, through all the technical and artistic hoops, until we get to a real, wearable piece of clothing.
All right, so here's our roadmap for this journey. We've got 5 key stops. We'll start in the designer's studio, then look at how the blueprint gets made, move on to the test garment, see how it's all stitched together, and finally, we'll get to see the final prototype.
Okay, first stop, the designer's studio. And really, you should think of this place less like a simple workshop and more like an architect's office. It's this hub of creativity, a space where ideas aren't just born, but they're tested, played with, and really explored.
And just look at the tools of the trade here. What's so cool is the mix of old and new. You've got these heavy-duty industrial sewing machines right next to, simple tailor's chalk and pins. It's this blend of high-tech and classic craft. Every single thing here, from the dress forms, those dummies that stand in for a person, to the humble tracing wheel, is an absolutely crucial instrument for creation. All right, so we've seen the tools. Now let's get into how they're used to create the garment's architectural plan. This right here, this is the critical moment. It's where a flat 2D idea starts its journey to becoming a 3D object, and it all begins with a pattern.
Now, when it comes to making that pattern, designers basically have 2 main paths they can take. The first is what's called flat pattern. This is super technical, a 2D method that's all about drafting shapes on paper with exact measurements. It's the blueprint, pure and simple. Then you've got draping. This is totally different. It's intuitive. It's 3D. The designer is literally sculpting fabric right on the dress form to find the shape. It's less like a blueprint and more like a sculpture.
Okay, so if you're going with that flat pattern method, your starting point is almost always this thing called a sloper, or sometimes a block. Don't think of this as a pattern for an actual dress. It's more like a master template. It has 0 design details, no seam allowances, nothing. It's just the pure, basic foundation that all the other more complex patterns are built from.
So that brings up a good question. Where do these standard sizes for slopers even come from? Well, they aren't just pulled out of thin air. They come from huge data projects. I mean, look at this, 11,000. That's the number of people who were measured in a big UK survey. They used 3D body scanners to get everything just right, creating really accurate modern sizing standards. It's pretty wild.
Okay, so the blueprint, our pattern, is ready to go, but you are not about to take your scissors to that super expensive final fabric. No way. First, you have to build a test version. Think of it as the fashion world's version of an architect's scale model.
And this test garment has a name. It's called a toile. You'll hear it pronounced toile. Basically, it's a prototype made out of cheap fabric like muslin or calico. Its only job is to let the designer see the pattern in 3D for the first time. To ask the big questions. Does it hang right? Is the fit good? Are the proportions working? The toile is where you find all the problems before they become expensive mistakes. And really, this whole process, the whole reason for the toile, is summed up perfectly by this quote from the legend himself, Hubert de Givenchy. The dress must follow the body of a woman, not the body following the shape of the dress. That's it, right there. The toile is how you make sure that happens. It's about making the garment work in harmony with the body. And one of the most important things you're testing with that toile is something called ease. So what's ease? It's simply the extra room that's built into a garment. It's the difference between your actual body measurements and the final measurements of the piece of clothing. It's what allows for comfort and movement. I mean, think about it. This is exactly why a size 12 winter coat fits way looser than a size 12 blouse from the same exact brand. The coat just has a ton more ease built into it. All right, so the pattern is perfect now. Thanks to the toile, we're finally ready for assembly. This is where those carefully cut pieces of the final fabric are brought together. And this isn't just sewing.
It's an art form all its own. It's where pure skill and construction takes center stage. And a huge part of that art is the seam itself. Yeah, the seam. It's so much more than just sticking two pieces of fabric together. The kind of seam a designer chooses is a major design and engineering decision. Like, a French seam is beautiful and clean. It encloses all the raw edges, so it's perfect for delicate, see-through fabrics. Then you have the total opposite, the flat felled seam. That's that super tough, double-stitched seam you find on jeans. The seam choice tells you everything about what that piece of clothing is meant to do.
Which brings us to our final step. All that planning, the testing, the pattern making, the fitting of the toile, the expert sewing, all of it has been leading up to this single moment. It's time for the final prototype.
And there it is, the prototype sample. After all of that work, this is it. The very first version of the garment made in the actual final fabric, with every single button, zipper, and finish in its proper place. So if the pattern was the blueprint and the toile was the scale model, well, this is the finished building. The designer's vision finally made real. It's ready to be seen, to be touched, and to be reviewed for the collection.
You know, designer Maggie Norris put it so beautifully when she talked about this stage. She said she's, quote, fulfilling the dreams of clients through our couture. And that's exactly what this prototype represents. It's not just the end of a process. It's the fulfillment of a vision. It's a dream made real.
So the next time you get dressed, maybe just take an extra second. Look a little closer at the cut, the finish, the seams on your own clothes. Because now you know that every single stitch, every little choice, it's all part of this long, incredible, creative journey. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What stories do the seams of your own clothes tell?
Have you ever found yourself watching a runway show, just completely mesmerized, and wondering, how on earth did that all come together? Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain on that whole process. We're going to break down the entire journey, from that very first flicker of an idea all the way to the final walk down the runway.
And let's kick things off with this brilliant quote from the one and only Karl Lagerfeld. He saw Chanel's signature elements, the pearls, the chains, the quilted fabric, as musical notes. He could just play with them, rearrange them, and compose something new. It's the perfect way to think about this, because fashion isn't just about sewing. It's about telling a story with a very specific set of creative tools.
So, what even is a collection? Well, at its core, it's a batch of clothes and accessories that are all connected by one big idea. Maybe it's a shared color palette, a certain silhouette, or a wild theme like, I don't know, 70s space travel. The whole point is that when you see it all together, it makes sense. It tells a single, coherent story. And that story, that vision, it always starts with a single creative spark. This first part of the process is all about digging deep, doing research, and just gathering inspiration. This is where a designer finds those notes that they're going to play with for the entire season. Now, designers usually hunt for ideas in two main ways. First up, you've got primary research. This is hands-on stuff. It's the designer themselves, out in the world, sketching a statue in a museum or taking photos of interesting textures. Then there's secondary research. This is all about looking at what's already out there, sifting through old magazines, studying trend reports, or diving into historical photo archives. Honestly, the best collections use a healthy mix of both.
And inspiration? It can come from literally anywhere. A designer could find the perfect jacket shape in a dusty thrift store, or get a whole color story from a painting at the Met. They're watching old movies, looking at buildings for interesting shapes, checking out street style blogs to see what people are actually wearing. It is a constant, nonstop search for that next big idea.
Okay, so you've got this big, beautiful cloud of abstract ideas from art and travel and old books. How does that start to look like something you can actually wear? Well, that transformation begins in the designer's sketchbook.
Right, so the designer's brain is just buzzing. They've got pictures, little scraps of fabric, all these images in their head. What's the next step? How do you take an idea, say a collar that's inspired by the curve of a seashell, and turn it into, well, an actual collar on a shirt? The answer is the sketchbook. But here's the thing, it's not a collection of pretty perfect drawings. Not at all. It's a lab. It's a working diary. It's probably messy, filled with scribbled notes, taped-in fabric samples, and tons of crossed-out ideas. This is where the designer is literally talking to themselves on the page, solving problems and figuring out how to make their big ideas actually work. But just as that creative vision starts to get clear, it smacks right into one of the biggest hurdles in fashion, the reality of business. This is where the beautiful, free-flowing art of design has to meet the cold, hard science of commerce.
You can think of every single collection as a kind of negotiation between these two worlds. On one side, you've got the designer's pure artistic concept. But on the other side, you've got the merchandiser. And they come to the table with spreadsheets and data, knowing exactly what sold last year, what the market wants, and what prices people are willing to pay. Their job is to make sure the beautiful vision is also a profitable one.
Because behind every single gorgeous piece of clothing is this simple, unbreakable rule. The price you see on the tag has to cover the cost of making the item plus the profit the company needs to stay in business. That's it. That's the financial engine of the whole industry.
Now, to figure out that cost part, companies use a few different models. A simple one might just add up the fabric and the labor. But the industry gold standard is activity-based costing, or ABC. Why? Because it's the most honest. It takes everything into account, from the designer's salary to the light bulbs in the studio, and assigns a tiny fraction of those costs to every single garment produced.
This whole process has its own lingo, and these terms are actually really important business checks. For instance, a carry-forward style is a safe bet. It's a bestseller from last season that they bring back in a new color. A range plan is like the master blueprint, making sure they have enough tops, pants, and dresses. And a toil, or muslin, is just a test garment made from cheap fabric. It lets them get the fit perfect before they start cutting into silk that costs $1,000 a yard.
So, after all that research, the sketching, the spreadsheets, and the prototypes, the collection is finally ready to meet the world. And it all culminates in that one big moment, the final showcase. This quote from Donna Karan just hits the nail on the head. It perfectly captures the whole point of that final presentation. A fashion show is where a designer has to prove they've met that challenge, that they've made something that's not just gorgeous, but also something you'd actually want to wear.
You know, a fashion show looks so smooth and effortless, but that's an illusion. Behind the scenes, it is an absolutely massive, meticulously planned operation. We're talking producers, budgets, venues, casting the right models, choreographing every single step. The entire goal is to make all that backstage chaos look completely seamless and magical out front.
And it's so important to remember that the show is doing two jobs at once. For sure, it's about artistic validation, the designer getting to say, "Here is my vision." But it's also a huge marketing event. It's a powerful sales pitch designed to get the press buzzing, and most importantly, to get those store buyers to pull out their checkbooks.
And that leaves us with one last big question. After the final model takes her bow and the lights come up, what actually defines success? Is it the 5-star reviews from the top critics? Is it just about the raw sales numbers? Or is it something else entirely? The collection's lasting impact, its legacy? It's a question that really gets to the very heart of what fashion is all about.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the fashion industry. You know, if you've got that creative spark, that raw talent, this is your roadmap for turning it into a real, actual career. Let's get into it.
So this is the big question, right? You know you've got the vision, you've got the skills. But how do you actually get from point A to point B? That path from just loving fashion to making it your profession can feel, well, a little foggy. We're here to clear that up.
All right, first things first. To get anywhere in the fashion world, you're going to need a passport. And in this industry, your passport is your portfolio. Honestly, it is the single most important thing you will create. And please, don't think of a portfolio as just a binder with your best sketches. It is so much more than that. It's really a story about you. It's where you communicate your big ideas, your unique skills, and what you're truly passionate about. And that gets us to its real job. At its core, your portfolio is a sales tool. Its #1 mission? To make an amazing first impression and sell your talent to a potential employer before you even open your mouth. Okay, so you know what it is. But how do you make one that actually gets you noticed? One that stands out from the pile? Let's get into the nitty-gritty of building a portfolio that truly works for you. You've basically got two options, physical or digital. The physical portfolio, it's a classic for a reason. You can include actual fabric swatches, show off textures, which in fashion is huge. But the digital one is your modern-day workhorse. It's perfect for backups, for your website, and for getting your work out there online fast. Now, there are a few golden rules you gotta live by. For starters, always lead with your strongest work.
You have to grab their attention immediately. And you need to be ruthless when you edit. A smaller portfolio with nothing but incredible work is way more powerful than a huge one with so-so pieces. It shows you're confident.
And this all boils down to confidence. This quote says it all, really. Your portfolio is a statement. Never put something in there that you feel like you have to make excuses for. If you're not 100% behind it, just leave it out. Let your best work do all the talking.
Okay, so you've put together this incredible portfolio. It's focused, it's confident, it tells your story. Now what? Well, you've got to get it in front of people. I mean, your work isn't going to land you a job if it's just sitting on your hard drive.
Today, promotion is all about the digital toolkit. You start with that digital portfolio we talked about. Then you use it as the heart of a blog or a personal website. And from there, you leverage professional sites. Think ArtsThread, Coralflot, LinkedIn to make real industry connections. This is how you build your personal brand.
But when you put yourself out there, how do you even get noticed in all that noise? The online world is crowded. And here's the secret. The only way to really cut through is to be you. Be authentic. Don't try to be the next big thing. Just focus on being the first and only you.
All right, so you've got a killer portfolio and a plan to promote it. Now it's time to zoom out and look at the industry itself. Where do you actually see yourself fitting in? Because it's a much bigger world than just the designer role.
This is probably the most important thing to understand. No designer, not a single one, works alone. From that first little sketch to the final piece hanging in a store, it's a huge team effort. Getting that is key to figuring out where you belong.
So who's on this team? Well, you can pretty much break the whole industry down into 3 core groups that have to work together. You've got the creative roles. That's your designers setting the vision. Then you have the technical roles, the people who actually bring it to life. And finally, the business roles, making sure it all makes money.
Let's connect those dots real quick. So the creative side comes up with the idea. The technical team, your pattern cutters, your garment techs, they're the wizards who turn that idea into a real physical thing you can wear. And then the business team, like buyers and merchandisers, they figure out how to get that right product to the right people. Just think about the journey of a single piece of clothing. It starts as a dream in a designer's head, and it ends up as part of a merchandiser's sales plan. Every single person along that path is a critical link in the chain. The whole brand relies on them working together perfectly.
And why does all this teamwork, all this complex process even matter? Well, this quote from the legendary Peter Drucker nails it. At the end of the day, all the creativity, all the technical skill, all the business strategy, it's all pointed at one single goal, making something that a customer will love and want to buy. That's what fuels the entire industry.
So here we are, full circle. You've got the roadmap to build your fashion passport, your portfolio. You know the tools to get it seen, and you have a map of the industry you're about to step into. The only question left is, where are you going to go with it?